Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 45 of the Build Podcast, and today we'll be going through Bower, which is a client-side JavaScript package manager. So let's first briefly look at some of the associated websites. This is the Bower main website, bower.io, and here you will come with the basic instructions on how to install it or even install the packages and configurations. A very short page for a young project, but it is definitely very self-explanatory. Next, connected to Bower, I also wanted to point out Bower components, or rather all the packages that are listed under Bower, is this neat little website created by Syndosaurus, and this also provides us a very neat little user interface to do some searches on what are the packages available. Just a few weeks ago, after the Google I/O talks were over, I also watched this video which I highly recommend you to watch. It's by Dan Heberden. He also spoke about client-side package management Bower, and he also used it with an AngularJS little application. So do go and check this out. And definitely this is his slides, and I was very intrigued by this slide of his, which is basically saying that Yeoman, Grunt, Bower, and Require.js are sort of the tool set for the client-side application. So Yeoman is basically the generator or the scaffolding type of application tool. Grunt is the build tool. The Bower is the package manager, and Require.js is the module loader. So very interesting thing. All are in heavy development, and something very exciting going on with each of these tools. So there are so many package managers. We have NPM, Bower, Ender, Volo. Which one to use? So the way I see it is, whenever I have some sort of server-side application, I use npm in terms of package.json to kind of install all the modules. And the Bower is sort of for the client side. I also highly recommend you to go through this article, which is written by Cody Lindley, another awesome JavaScript developer. And he spoke in this very detailed article both about npm and Bower. And I would like to point out especially this paragraph on what Bower is not, because I feel he pointed out exactly where NPM and Bower both has their uses. For example, in NPM, it uses this kind of common JS modular pattern to include the various NPM modules, whereas Bower is a little bit agnostic, or rather flexible. Later on, you will see that Bower, we can also use it for browser-specific modules. All right, so with that little introduction, let's get started with Bower. So let me come back to my command line, and inside this project, I only have one simple file, which is index.html. So next, you will need npm itself to install Bower, and it is good to install Bower globally. So we will go ahead and use this command npm install -g for global, and then Bower. Now, I already did that. So when I do Bower -- version, I will get a reply back saying it is 0.9.2. Of course, along with knowing the version, the other command that I always like to use is the help command. So Bower help is definitely a very useful command. And later on, we'll be using a lot of them. Right, so just like any other package managers, I find that the commands for any package manager is pretty similar. So it should be very intuitive and easy to pick up Bower for any of us. So the very first thing we will do is to search for packages. So let's say Bower search. One of the very common client-side frameworks that we tend to use is Jquery. So let's go ahead and search for that. So there you go. It will basically list not only Jquery, but also a lot of Jquery-based applications. Now, this is hardly any useful because you have so much, such a long list. So let's go ahead and search for a specific one. How about this thing called Form Styler? So in order to search for Form Styler under Jquery, we will do Bower search Jquery, and then we will just grep it with Form Styler. And there you go, it will give us the answer. and some information about it, especially its Git repository. Now, apart from search, if you want to specifically know some information about that package, we can also do so, and that's via Bower info, and let's just try a Jquery. And the interesting thing is it will give us a long list of versions that are available, which is very useful whenever we want to install a package. So that was a little bit about searching and finding out information about the available packages in the entire Bower environment. Now, what if we want to install a Jquery? Now, notice here, once I come back to my text editor, it's only index.html, and I am inside that folder in the command line. So let's install Jquery. So I'll do Bower install Jquery. And notice once this happens, when we come back to the folder structure, we will see that there'll be this little folder called components, and once we open up, we will see Jquery, and inside here there'll be several files, and there you go, we will see jquery.min.js or even jquery.js for the development version. And as usual, if you want to uninstall it, it's really easy. We'll just do Bower uninstall and Jquery. And when we go back to the folder structure, we will see that the components folder is completely empty. Now, let's say we want a particular version of Jquery, not the latest one. When we do Bower install and the package name, it will basically give us the latest one. As you observed here, it was 2.0.1, and in Jquery info, it was the latest one. What if we want to have the 1.10 version? Because in Jquery 2.0 they are not supporting the legacy browsers, so let's just settle for 1.10 because I want to support legacy browser for this project. So in order to do that, it will be Bower install Jquery, very same, but instead now we will append the version number with a hash sign. So I'll do 1.10. Great, so there you go, it will install 1.10. Why don't we hook it up with our HTML file? So in order to do that, we will do it inside the script tag, of course, and then the source attribute, and we will find it under the file jquery.min.js. Let me just click it. And yep, it is version 1.10. So why don't we refer to the path /jquery.min.js. Let's open this up in the browser. And why don't we just query Jquery? Yep, it's coming up pretty fine. And how about the version? And there you go, it gives us 1.10. Now, this is where I see the power of Bower. Traditionally, what we would do is probably go to the Jquery website or some kind of CDN website from Google or cdnjs.com, and then download it to our local folder and then refer it. That process probably took us a few minutes, but over here all we need to do is just some command line instructions, and we can switch the versions with a click of our finger. Great, now this is all good, but usually in a project we will have more than one framework to kind of refer to and base our main project code upon. And for this, it is probably better to have some kind of manifest file, which the Bower will call in one shot. It will install all the frameworks that are needed. So let's go ahead and create the manifest file. So right now, if we want to create the manifest file, let's start afresh. So for this, I'll just delete away all the dependencies for this project. And it's really easy. All we need to do is just delete this components folder. So in order to do that, we can just simply do rm-rf and then components. And there you go, we will be back with our plain old HTML file. So why don't we create a manifest file, and this will consist of a few packages, and with just one command it will install all the packages. So in order to do that, to initiate this manifest file, we will simply do Bower and then init. And we can do a name of the project. So maybe for this, I'll just do example Bower version 0.0.1. And once you do that, you'll notice this brand new file bower.json will be created. And this is where we can add in the various dependencies. In order to include the dependencies, we will extend the JSON format, and then we will say dependencies, And inside here, let's include some of them. So the very first one was Jquery, and here we will include the version. So for us, let's say it was 2.0.1. Now the interesting thing about this dependency parameter is that we can define the framework name on the left, or rather as the key, and then the value can be the three things. So what are the three things? According to the Bower documentation, we can see that three things can be version, package, or folder. As you saw here, the version name is included. Why don't we include another package, and that is called moment. And let me just do a little search about moments. So Bower search moment. So there you go. I do have a moment, but let me get some info about it. So Bower info moment. Great, so there are many versions of moment available, but I'll just take the latest one, which is 2.0.0. So let me come back to the manifest file and I'll do this. So notice here I have two frameworks, or rather dependencies, that I need for my project. So all you need is a bower.json file. And how do we install these? All we need to do is come back to our command line and then do bower and install. So as you can see, it has finished installing Jquery as well as moment. And now when we go back to our project folder, inside the components folder, we'll find two folders, which is Jquery and moment. And yep, of course, if we open it up, we will find the relevant files to refer into our JavaScript or HTML. Now let's say during the development of the project, we want to include one more dependency, and there is a shortcut to install it as well as include that one more line in bower.json in one command. So let's go ahead and try that. So let me try to install Prism.js, which is a syntax highlighting JavaScript framework. So to do that, we'll do bower install prism, and we will pass in a parameter called --save. So this will do two things. One, it will definitely install the framework itself, and if you come back to the folder components, Prism will be there. And next, you will also see Prism has been automatically added to the bower.json file. So next time when you do bower install, it will refer to this JSON file and take all the dependencies that are needed. Awesome. So after all the JavaScript libraries are already installed, why don't we go and refer to it? Now notice here in Jquery, we did not change the path, but just with few commands, we have easily changed the version number. And now when we go back to our little project and we query the Jquery version, yep, it is 2.0.1. And if we query whether moment is available, it is obviously not available because although we have downloaded it, we did not refer to it. So for moment, it will be components-moment moment.min.js. Awesome. Why don't we try to use moment a little bit? So let's try to use this one, which is really easy. Basically, it will format the date for us. So after requiring all the dependencies, we will open up another brand new script tag, and inside here, I'll simply call moment. I obviously need to enclose it within console log statement so that it comes up in the console. And there you go. It will say 2 years. So using this form of installing various packages becomes really easy for us to change the versions and test out because it is just so modular. Right, so why don't we start over once again? So I am going to delete the folder, and of course you will see that we cannot refer to the files anymore. And in our project folder, the components folder is completely gone. This time, we will initiate a Bower config file. To initiate a Bower config file, we need to create a new file and call it Bower RC. And the RC file basically is another JSON file. One of the parameters is called directory. Now by default it was called components. Let's say we wanted for this project to be called as libs or libraries. It is possible. And you can also define the JSON file name. For us, it can be bower.json as we have already created, or it can be even a name of your choice. Of course, be sure to check out other several options that are available as part of Bower RC. Right, so once we have these three files, now we have bower RC, which is the config file, bower JSON, which basically states what are the dependencies which are particular for this project, and lastly is the index.html. Now once we have that, all we need to do is bower and install. Great, so looks like all the three files or frameworks are already installed, but this time notice that the folder name is libs, just as we defined it in the bower RC file. And when we open it, these are the three files. Of course, be sure to change them when we go to the index.html. So I'll go ahead and change them to libs. And of course, when we go back to our project, the moment.js is working. Lastly, we will use bower with require.js, which is an AMD JavaScript loader. Now, if you have a lot of libraries to be loaded, script tags are definitely not one of the most performance enhancing. So AMD loaders such as require.js comes in really handy. Now, the other day I was reading through another open book by Adi Osmani writing modular JavaScript with AMD CommonJS and ES Harmony. I highly recommend you to check this out, because as our complex applications grow, we will definitely use some sort of modular JavaScript to kind of make it more efficient and loosely coupled. Great, so instead of having so many script tags, we will just have one script tag. So the script tag for require.js will firstly refer to require.js library itself, and it will have a data main attribute which will refer to the project's main.js. Right, so for the source, I will just go to CDN.js, one of my favorite CDNs to use. So let's find require.js. So there you go, this is the one. And I'll use a CDN copy, and inside data main attribute, I'll just include main. It will automatically read it as main.js. So why don't we go ahead and create that file? So new file, main.js. Now inside main.js, we'll do two things. Firstly, we will define the configurations, or rather the dependencies of each of the modules. And then we will require each of the modules and make them do some functions. And inside here, we will include some paths. As you notice, the first one is Jquery. Jquery/jquery.min. Now we do not need to include the .js. Similarly, we will also include a moment.js. Next, we will require them first. So firstly, we need to define all the dependencies. So the very first one is Jquery, and then the next one is moment. And the second parameter is actually a function, and this function will pass in the modules, and I will basically use moment. Now notice here, this becomes a lot more efficient because number one, you have only one script tag, and number two, you only need to come back to these paths to define where are the exact JavaScript files, and they are all being maintained by the bower. Great, so now when we come back and we refresh the project, well, nothing has seemed to change, but we are obviously using require.js to do our modular JavaScript file loading. Now lastly, before we end, sometimes we need certain files or packages only in our development environment. So let me give you one example. So I often use heads up grid, especially in development environment, because I want this sort of grid to be defined as I'm coding up the client-side application. So why don't we go ahead and search for this? So you see no results are found. At this point, how do you include packages that are not listed in the bower? So for this, we will go to the Git repository and we will grab the Git URL. So make sure you choose Git, and then we will copy this URL, come back to bower.json, and this time we will include it in a different parameter called dev dependencies. And we can similarly give it a name called HuGrid. And instead of the version number here, we can actually include the Git repository. Right, so why don't we do a fresh install? So I'll just remove the components and I'll do bower install. So notice here, after it has installed everything, when we go back, it is under libs folder as defined in bower RC file, and it will install all the relevant packages needed, including the ones in our development environment. So now let's go to our main.js and put in the relevant Jquery code. So I'll just put in a very simple code as defined here. Alright, so it says main.js make Jquery is not defined. So where did we go wrong? Obviously we did not include it in the config. So why don't we go ahead and include it? So here you go, Jquery, and of course here we will also have to identify the module, which is Jquery, and as the function parameter as well. And of course we will also need the CSS. Now this is also one of the main things about Bower, is that we can also refer to CSS files just like this. So it will be very similar, libs slash something like this. So once again, if you notice from the JSON file, we had about 4 packages, and one of them are specifically for the development environment. And in our script tag, we refer to one file called main.js, and we loaded up all the modules via the require.js AMD method, and we even refer to a .css file. And there you go. Jquery is available, and if we on it, the grid lines are available, and this is only for the development environment. Let's check out some other resources that I found very helpful in understanding not only what are package managers in general, but of course about Bower. So here's one, package management for the browser with Bower. The next one is an important article, I feel. It's the state of package management in the JavaScript environment. Here the author goes and compares not only what are the available package managers, but also why and how to use them. So NPM, Bower, Ender, Volo, Component, Jam. Wow, there are really a lot. So this article is really good to understand the different technologies behind each of them. And next is of course Yeoman, which is heavily coupled with Bower as the package manager. I recommend you to also use Yeoman if you want to sort of scaffold or generate some stuff. And lastly, there is by Ben Schwartz, there's this very neat Sublime text package, and you can basically, so let me just show you very quickly what it does. So you can come here and shift command P, and you can go to Bower, and you can install package from here. So why don't we try one? So there you go, all the packages to install will come up here. So let me just try, for the sake of fun, let me just try this Agility. So there you go, it will say downloading Agility, and you will also eventually have it as a folder right here. And guess what, very nicely it will automatically include it in the .json file, which is basically same as including -- save in our command. So pretty neat tool, do check it out. And finally, for the build link of the episode, it goes to uptodate.frontendrescue.org. I found this website really fun to read and also to learn on how to pick up technologies that are so useful. And not only on technology, they also talk about cool people, some of the amazing people from whom we can learn from. So do go ahead and give this website a brush through. Tons of links, tons of inspiration, and definitely a big nudge for all of us to go there and create something. So have fun, and hope Bower makes you more organized in the client side of projects. So that's it for this week's episode of Bower Client-Side Package Manager. For all other episodes of Build Podcast, you can visit build-podcast.com and subscribe via one of the 5 channels: RSS, GitHub, iTunes, Vimeo, and YouTube, and get your weekly content. And I'll see you next week. Goodbye.